I still remember the way Dominic's eyes lit up when he saw me, a deep, soulful gaze that penetrated my heart. He was everything my family despised: poor, ambitious, and fiercely independent. They couldn't fathom why I, Regina Leclerc, heiress to a vast fortune, would fall for someone like him. But love doesn't obey societal rules. We met at a charity event hosted by my parents, an annual display of their wealth and benevolence. Dominic was there as part of the event staff, his presence an unspoken reminder of the stark divide between our worlds. I noticed him immediately, his strong, confident posture, and the way he seemed to carry an air of quiet defiance. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and in that instant, something shifted inside me. "Would you care for a dance?" he asked later that evening, surprising me as he stood at the edge of the dance floor. His voice was calm, almost daring. I hesitated, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. "I don't think that's a good idea," I whispered, my heart pounding. "Why not?" "It's just a dance," he said, extending his hand, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. I took his hand, feeling a rush of excitement and trepidation. As we moved to the music, the world around us seemed to blur. For a few precious minutes, I felt free from the constraints of my privileged life. Our secret meetings became the highlight of my existence. We met in secluded parks, quiet cafes, and abandoned buildings that held stories of their own. Each moment with Dominic was a treasure, a defiance against the expectations placed upon me. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and our hopes for a future together. One night, under the canopy of stars, I confessed my deepest fears to him. "I'm scared, Dominic. What if my parents find out? What if they tear us apart?" He took my hands in his grip firm and reassuring. "We'll find a way, Regina. I love you, and nothing they do can change that." But the reality of our situation was never far from my mind. My parents' disapproval was a constant shadow over our happiness. They had grand plans for me, plans that didn't include a life with Dominic. They introduced me to potential suitors, men from influential families, each one more insufferable than the last. Then came the night that shattered my world. I was at home, preparing for another one of my parents' lavish parties, when the doorbell rang. My mother answered it, her sharp voice echoing through the hall. "Regina, come here this instant." I hurried down the stairs, my heart sinking at the sight of two police officers standing in the foyer. Dominic stood between them, his hands cuffed, his face pale but composed. "What's going on?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. One of the officers spoke, his tone cold and professional. "Dominic has been arrested for robbery. We have evidence linking him to the crime." "That's impossible," I cried. "Dominic would never do such a thing." My father stepped forward, his expression hard. "Regina, it's time you saw the truth. This man is not who you think he is." Dominic's eyes met mine, a silent plea for trust. "Regina, I didn't do it. You have to believe me." "I do," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I believe you." But my words did nothing to stop the officers from taking him away. I watched in helpless despair as they led him out the door, my heart breaking with every step he took. 14 years. It was a sentence not just for him, but for my heart as well. Under immense pressure from my parents, who saw this as an opportunity to steer my life back on the right path, I felt cornered. They introduced me to Milo, a childhood friend, someone who had always been around, loyal and dependable. They believed he could mend my broken heart. Blinded by grief and the bleak prospect of ever seeing Dominic again, I caved in. I agreed to marry Milo, despite the void in my heart where Dominic's love once thrived. The day of the wedding was a blur. I wore a beautiful white gown, my mother beaming with pride, my father looking satisfied. Milo stood at the altar, his eyes filled with love and hope. I forced a smile, repeating the vows with a hollow heart. As we exchanged rings, Milo whispered, "I promise to make you happy, Regina." I nodded, unable to speak. Inside, I was screaming, my soul crying out for the man who had been unjustly torn from my life. The ceremony ended with a kiss that felt more like a farewell to my dreams than the beginning of a new life. That night, as I lay in bed next to Milo, the weight of my choices pressed down on me. I had traded love for security, passion for stability. The man I truly loved was lost to me, and in his place was a kind, gentle man who deserved a better wife than I could ever be. I closed my eyes, the image of Dominic's pleading gaze haunting my thoughts. I'd vowed to keep his memory alive, to hold on to the hope that one day the truth would come to light and we could be together again. Until then, I would endure living a life that felt like a lie, waiting for the moment when my fractured heart might finally be healed. Milo and I moved into a grand house on the outskirts of town, a wedding gift from my parents. It was everything a newlywed couple could dream of: spacious rooms filled with luxurious furnishings, a sprawling garden, and a staff to cater to our every need. But to me, it felt like a gilded cage. In the beginning, I tried to make it work. Milo deserved that much. He was kind and attentive, always considerate of my feelings. He never pushed me to be someone I wasn't, and for that, I was grateful. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't summon the same passion for him that I had for Dominic. Our marriage was built on mutual respect, but it lacked the fire of love. I remained distant, unable to see him as anything more than a friend. Every morning, Milo would kiss my forehead before leaving for work. "Have a good day, Regina," he would say, his eyes searching mine for any sign of affection. "You too, Milo," I would reply, forcing a smile. "I'll see you at dinner." Dinner was always a formal affair, a silent testament to our unspoken disconnection. We would sit across from each other, making small talk about our day, never delving deeper into our true feelings. One evening, as we sat in the dimly lit dining room, Milo looked at me with a concerned expression. "Regina, is there something bothering you? You seem distant lately." I sighed, placing my fork down. "I'm sorry, Milo. I know I haven't been the best wife. It's just, everything feels so different now." He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I understand. This transition has been hard for both of us, but I'm here for you, Regina. I want to make this work." I squeezed his hand, appreciating his effort. "I know, Milo. And I do too. It's just going to take some time." Milo nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "We'll get through this together, Regina. I believe in us." Despite his reassurances, the void in my heart remained. I busied myself with charity work, social events, and redecorating the house, trying to fill the emptiness inside. But every night, as I lay in bed next to Milo, my thoughts drifted back to Dominic. I wondered where he was, how he was coping with his unjust imprisonment, and if he ever thought of me. One afternoon, while sorting through old photos, I found a picture of Dominic and me, taken during one of our secret outings. We were sitting on a park bench, laughing at something he had said. The joy on our faces was palpable, a stark contrast to the hollow existence I now led. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the photo to my chest, longing for the days when our love had felt invincible. Milo's presence in my life was a constant reminder of the choice I had made. He deserved better than my coldness and detachment, but I couldn't give him what he needed. I avoided his touch, his kisses, his attempts at intimacy. Our marriage bed felt like a battlefield, each night a struggle to maintain the facade of a happy couple. One night, as we lay in bed, Milo turned to me, his voice filled with quiet desperation. "Regina, do you ever think we could be truly happy together?" I turned to face him, the weight of his question heavy on my heart. "Milo, you're a wonderful man. You deserve all the happiness in the world. But I can't give you what you're looking for. My heart, it's not here." He sighed, his eyes filled with sadness. "I know, Regina. I know you still love him, and I can't compete with a ghost." I reached out, touching his cheek gently. "I'm so sorry, Milo. I wish things were different." He covered my hand with his, closing his eyes. "So do I, Regina. So do I." In the days that followed, I tried to focus on the positives. Milo and I shared a deep mutual respect, and he was always there for me, a steadfast presence in my life. But without love, our marriage felt like a hollow union, an unspoken agreement to coexist rather than truly live. The charity events and social gatherings became a blur, each one blending into the next. I smiled for the cameras, played the part of the perfect wife, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was a storm of emotions, longing for a love that had been stolen from me. One day, as I was leaving a charity luncheon, I ran into Lauren, an old friend from school. We hadn't seen each other in years, and our reunion was filled with excitement and nostalgia. We decided to catch up over coffee, and as we talked, I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't with anyone else. Regina, you don't seem happy, Lauren observed, her eyes filled with concern. Is everything okay? I sighed, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. It's complicated, Lauren. I feel like I'm living someone else's life. Does this have anything to do with Dominic? She asked gently. I looked up, surprised. How did you know? Because you were always different with him. There was a spark in your eyes that I haven't seen in a long time, she said, her voice soft. I nodded, tears welling up. I still love him, Lauren, and I don't know how to move on. Lauren reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You deserve to be happy, Regina. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Her words stayed with me long after we parted ways. They ignited a flicker of hope in my heart, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back to the love I had lost. But for now, I was trapped in a hollow union, a prisoner of my own choices, waiting for a chance to break free. The days grew longer and lonelier as I struggled to find meaning in my life with Milo. Despite his unwavering support and patience, the void in my heart remained. My mind often wandered back to Dominic, imagining what his life was like behind bars. Was he thinking of me? Did he still love me? These questions plagued my thoughts daily. It was during one of my frequent luncheons with Lauren, a close friend, that the past came crashing back into my present. We met at our favorite cafe, a quaint little place tucked away from the bustling streets. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft chatter of patrons created a comforting atmosphere, one where I could almost forget my troubles. Regina, you look exhausted, Lauren said, concern etched on her face as she took a sip of her cappuccino. Is everything okay? I forced a smile, stirring my tea. I'm just tired, Lauren. Life has been challenging. Lauren leaned in, her eyes narrowing. Is it Milo? Are things not working out? I shook my head, looking down at my cup. Milo is wonderful. It's not him, it's me. I just can't seem to move on from the past. Lauren's expression softened. You mean Dominic, don't you? I nodded, tears threatening to spill over. I can't stop thinking about him, Lauren. It's been years, but it feels like just yesterday he was taken from me. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I heard something recently. Dominic is due for release soon. Her words hit me like a lightning bolt. My heart raced, and I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in years. What? How do you know? I have a friend who works in the legal system. She mentioned his case came up in conversation. He's being released on good behavior, Lauren explained, her eyes shining with excitement. The news was overwhelming. Dominic free after 14 long years. A flood of emotions surged through me. Hope, fear, excitement, and an overwhelming desire to see him again. Lauren, noticing my reaction, pressed on. You still love him, don't you? I couldn't lie. Yes, I whispered. I never stopped. Lauren smiled warmly. Then you need to see him, Regina. You need to tell him everything. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing with possibilities. What would it be like to see Dominic again? Would he still care for me after all these years? More importantly, what would I do about my marriage to Milo? The next morning, I decided to tell Milo about Dominic's imminent release. I found him in his study, buried in paperwork as usual. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the doorframe. Milo, can we talk? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He looked up, his expression softening. Of course, Regina, what's on your mind? I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. I have some news. Dominic is being released soon. Milo's face remained calm, though I saw a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, flash in his eyes. I see. And how do you feel about that? I sat down, wringing my hands. I don't know, Milo. Unhappy for him, of course, but it's bringing up a lot of old feelings. I need to see him to talk to him. Milo leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. I understand, Regina. You need closure. But what about us? I looked into his eyes, searching for the right words. Milo, I care about you deeply. But I can't keep living like this, pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I need to see Dominic to understand what happened and to figure out what I really want. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I knew this day would come. I just hoped it wouldn't be so soon. I reached out, taking his hand. Milo, you've been nothing but kind and patient. You deserve someone who can give you their whole heart. And right now, that's not me. Milo's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I love you, Regina, and I want you to be happy even if it's not with me. His words touched me deeply, and I squeezed his hand, tears streaming down my face. Thank you, Milo, for everything. In the days that followed, I made arrangements to meet Dominic upon his release. I contacted old friends, hired a private investigator, and pieced together the events of that fateful night. The anticipation of seeing Dominic again consumed me, and I found myself counting down the days until his release. Finally, the day arrived. I stood outside the gates of the correctional facility, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with anticipation, the weight of the past 14 years pressing down on me. When the gates opened and Dominic walked out, my breath caught in my throat. He looked older, wearier, but his eyes still held that same spark that had captivated me all those years ago. Regina, he said, his voice a mix of disbelief and hope. I ran to him, tears streaming down my face. Dominic, I'm so sorry, I choked out. I found out the truth. My father framed you, and Milo was forced to help him. Please forgive me. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight. I never stopped loving you, he whispered. And I forgive you. We were both victims of their schemes. We stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace, the world around us fading into insignificance. As we pulled away, I took his hand, my heart filled with determination. Let's start over, I said. In Portugal. A new life, just you and me. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. I'd like that, Regina. I'd like that very much. Together, we walked away from the prison gates, leaving the past behind and stepping into a future filled with promise and hope. The days following my reunion with Dominic were a whirlwind of emotions. We spent hours talking about our past, our lost years, and our hopes for the future. My heart felt lighter than it had in years, and for the first time, I allowed myself to dream of a life filled with genuine happiness. However, my marriage to Milo was a shadow that loomed over my newfound joy. Though I had been honest with him about my feelings for Dominic, I knew I needed to formally end our relationship. It was the only way to move forward with a clear conscience. One evening, as I walked through the quiet halls of our grand house, I heard voices coming from Milo's study. The door was slightly ajar, and I recognized the deep tones of my father's voice. Curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. Milo, you need to understand, my father was saying. It was the only way to ensure Regina's future. Dominic was a threat to everything we've built. Milo's response was strained. I didn't have a choice, Mr. Leclerc. You made it clear that my business would be ruined if I didn't go along with your plan. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to hear every word. My father's voice was cold, devoid of any remorse. And it worked, didn't it? Regina married you, and Dominic was out of the picture. You got what you wanted, a successful business and a beautiful wife. Milo's voice was filled with anguish. But at what cost? Regina has never been happy with me. She's still in love with Dominic, and now he's free. Everything we've done will come to light. My father scoffed. Dominic's release changes nothing. We can still control the situation. Regina will come around eventually. She has no choice. Unable to listen any longer, I pushed the door open and stepped into the room. Both men turned to face me, shock and guilt written across their faces. Regina, Milo began, his voice trembling. Save it, Milo, I interrupted, my voice cold and determined. I heard everything. You knew my father framed Dominic, and you went along with it to protect your business. My father stepped forward, his expression hardening. Regina, you don't understand. We did what we had to do for your own good. My own good? I echoed, disbelief and anger bubbling within me. You ruined Dominic's life and manipulated me into a loveless marriage, all for your own selfish reasons. Milo looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. Regina, I never wanted to hurt you. I was desperate. Your father threatened everything I had worked for. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. Desperation is no excuse for what you did. You betrayed me, both of you. Turning to my father, I spat out, You will never control my life again. I am leaving Milo, and I am going to be with Dominic. You can't stop me. My father's face twisted with rage. You ungrateful child. Everything I've done has been for you. No, everything you've done has been for your own pride and control, I shut back. I don't need your protection. I don't need anything from you. I stormed out of the study, leaving them both standing in stunned silence. My heart was racing, my mind a whirlwind of emotions, but I knew one thing for certain. I was done being a pawn in their games. That night, I packed my bags, my hands shaking with a mix of fear and determination. Milo tried to talk to me, to plead for forgiveness, but I couldn't bear to listen. I had to get away, to start anew with Dominic. As I finished packing, Milo stood in the doorway, his face etched with sorrow. "Regina, please just hear me out." I turned to face him, my expression resolute. "There's nothing more to say, Milo. Our marriage was built on lies and manipulation. I can't stay here knowing what you've done." He nodded slowly, tears welling up in his eyes. "I understand. I just want you to know that I truly did love you in my own way." I sighed, feeling a pang of sadness for the man who had been both a victim and a perpetrator of my father's schemes. And I wish things could have been different. But I need to follow my heart. Leaving the house felt like shedding a heavy weight. I drove to the small apartment where Dominic was staying, my heart pounding with anticipation. When he opened the door, his face lit up with a smile that chased away all my fears. "Regina," he said, pulling me into his arms. I was beginning to worry. I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his embrace. "I'm here, Dominic. I'm here to stay." We spent the night talking, planning our future in Portugal, a place where we could leave the past behind and build a new life together. The thought of escaping the suffocating influence of my father and the betrayal of Milo filled me with a renewed sense of hope. The next morning, as the sun rose, casting a golden glow over the city, I knew that I had made the right choice. For the first time in years, I felt free. With Dominic by my side, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, we would start a new chapter, one filled with love, honesty, and the promise of a brighter future. The decision to leave Milo and sever ties with my father had been the hardest yet most liberating choice I'd ever made. Dominic and I had found solace in each other, but the ghosts of the past still haunted us. To truly move forward, we needed closure. We needed the truth. Determined to uncover the full extent of my father's machinations, I hired a private investigator named Jack Ralston. Jack was a grizzled veteran with a reputation for unearthing secrets that others would prefer remain buried. He was exactly who we needed to expose the depths of my father's betrayal. Jack and I met in a small, dimly lit office downtown. The walls were lined with old case files, and the air smelled faintly of tobacco. "Regina Leclerc, it's a pleasure," Jack said, extending a calloused hand. His piercing blue eyes scrutinized me with a mixture of curiosity and respect. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Ralston," I replied, shaking his hand firmly. "I need your help to uncover the truth about my father's involvement in framing Dominic." Jack nodded, leaning back in his chair. "I've done my homework on your father, Miss Leclerc. He's a powerful man with many connections. This won't be easy." "I understand," I said, my resolve unwavering. "But we need to know the truth. Dominic deserves justice, and I need to make things right." Jack nodded, his expression serious. "I'll take the case. But I need you to be prepared for what we might find. The truth can be ugly." Over the next few weeks, Jack delved into my father's past, digging through financial records, correspondence, and anything that might shed light on his dealings. Dominic and I continued to plan our future, but the investigation weighed heavily on us both. We knew that our happiness depended on uncovering the full truth. One evening, Jack called me with news. "Regina, I've found something. Can you meet me at my office?" Dominic and I drove to Jack's office, our hearts pounding with anticipation. When we arrived, Jack's expression was grave. "I've uncovered a series of transactions and communications that implicate your father in framing Dominic," Jack began, spreading out a series of documents on his desk. He paid off key witnesses, fabricated evidence, and used his influence to ensure Dominic was convicted. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. How could he do this? How could he ruin Dominic's life just to control mine? Dominic placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We need to focus on what we can do now. How do we use this information to clear my name?" Jack nodded. "We'll need to present this evidence to the authorities. It'll be a long and difficult process, but with this documentation, we have a strong case. As we pored over the documents, a plan began to take shape. We would gather all the evidence and present it to a trusted lawyer who could help us navigate the legal system. It wouldn't be easy, but with determination and the truth on our side, we believed we could succeed. A few days later, we met with Emily Watkins, a renowned defense attorney with a track record of overturning wrongful convictions. Emily was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a passion for justice. "Regina, Dominic, Jack, please have a seat," she said, gesturing to the chairs in her office. "I've reviewed the evidence Jack provided. It's compelling, but we'll need to be thorough in building our case." "What do we need to do?" Dominic asked, his voice steady. "We'll need to gather testimonies from the witnesses who were paid off, track down any additional evidence that can corroborate our claims, and prepare for a legal battle against your father and his associates," Emily explained. "It's going to be a fight, but I'm confident we can win." The following weeks were a blur of activity. Jack worked tirelessly to track down the witnesses, many of whom were initially reluctant to speak out against my father. With persistence and the promise of legal protection, we managed to secure several key testimonies that supported our claims. Meanwhile, Dominic and I spent countless hours with Emily, preparing for the court proceedings. It was a grueling process, but our determination never wavered. We knew that clearing Dominic's name was the first step toward rebuilding our lives. One evening, as we sat in Emily's office going over the final details of our case, she looked at us with a determined expression. "We're ready. Tomorrow, we'll present our evidence to the court. This is our chance to expose the truth." The next day, we stood outside the courthouse, nerves and anticipation coursing through us. Dominic took my hand, squeezing it gently. "No matter what happens, Regina, we'll face it together." I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. Together. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. My father sat with his high-powered legal team, his expression a mask of indifference. Milo was also present, looking conflicted and guilty. Emily began her presentation, meticulously laying out the evidence we had gathered. She called the witnesses to testify, each one recounting how they had been coerced or bribed by my father. The courtroom buzzed with shock and disbelief as the truth unraveled. My father's attorney tried to discredit the witnesses and dismiss the evidence, but Emily was relentless, countering each argument with facts and unwavering resolve. Finally, Emily called me to the stand. As I walked to the front of the courtroom, I felt a surge of determination. I would not let my father's manipulation define my life any longer. "Regina, can you describe your relationship with Dominic and the impact of his conviction on your life?" Emily asked, her voice steady and reassuring. I took a deep breath, looking out at the faces in the courtroom. Dominic and I fell in love despite the differences in our social status. He was falsely accused and convicted because my father couldn't accept our relationship. For 14 years, Dominic has suffered in prison for a crime he didn't commit, and I was forced into a loveless marriage. We deserve justice. We deserve the truth. The courtroom fell silent as my words hung in the air. Emily turned to the judge, her expression resolute. "Your Honor, we have presented overwhelming evidence of a wrongful conviction orchestrated by powerful individuals. We ask for Dominic's immediate exoneration and a full investigation into those responsible for this travesty of justice." The judge deliberated for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he spoke, his voice firm. "Based on the evidence and testimonies presented, it is clear that Dominic was wrongfully convicted. I hereby order his immediate release and a thorough investigation into the actions of those involved in this conspiracy." Relief and joy washed over me as the judge's words sank in. Dominic was free, and the truth had finally been revealed. We embraced, tears of happiness streaming down our faces. As we left the courtroom, my father glared at me, his power and influence diminished. Milo approached us, his expression contrite. "Regina, Dominic, I'm so sorry for my part in all of this," Milo said, his voice trembling. "I was weak and afraid. I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me." Dominic looked at him, a mixture of sadness and understanding in his eyes. "We can't change the past, Milo, but we can choose to move forward. I hope you find peace." Milo nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you." As Dominic and I walked out of the courthouse, hand in hand, I felt a profound sense of closure. The search for truth had been arduous, but it had brought us to a place of healing and hope. Now we could finally look to the future together, with the promise of a new beginning in Portugal. The day of Dominic's release dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the dark days we had endured. I stood outside the prison gates, the imposing structure casting long shadows over the ground. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the countdown to Dominic's freedom. As the gates slowly creaked open, a group of newly released prisoners began to emerge. My eyes scanned the faces eagerly, searching for the one I had longed to see for 14 years. Finally, Dominic stepped out, his figure slightly thinner but his posture as proud as ever. He hesitated for a moment, then his gaze locked onto mine, and his face broke into a radiant smile. "Regina," he called, his voice filled with emotion. "Dominic," I cried, running to him. We embraced tightly, the world around us fading into insignificance. "I've waited so long for this moment," he murmured, burying his face in my hair. "I thought I'd never see you again." I pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. "It's over now, Dominic. You're free, and we can finally be together." He cupped my face in his hands, his eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how I survived without you." "You don't have to anymore," I whispered. "We have our whole lives ahead of us." We walked away from the prison, hand in hand, ready to leave the past behind. We had arranged to meet with Emily and Jack to finalize the plans for our new life. They were waiting for us at a small cafe nearby, their expressions a mixture of triumph and relief. "Dominic, Regina," Emily greeted us warmly. "It's good to see you both." "Thank you for everything," Dominic said, shaking her hand. "We couldn't have done this without you." Emily smiled. "It was my pleasure. You deserve justice, and I'm glad we could achieve that." Jack, ever the pragmatist, got straight to business. "I've arranged for your travel documents and accommodations in Portugal. You'll have everything you need to start fresh." "Thank you, Jack," I said, feeling a surge of gratitude. "You've been incredible." He shrugged modestly. "Just doing my job. But I have to say, it's not every day I get to see such a happy ending." After our meeting, Dominic and I took a walk through the city, savoring the freedom and the prospect of a new beginning. We talked about our plans, our dreams, and how we would rebuild our lives together. The future seemed bright and full of promise. Later that evening, we returned to the apartment I had been staying in since leaving Milo. It was modest but cozy, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like home. As we settled in, we talked more about the past and the journey that had brought us here. "Do you ever think about what might have been if none of this had happened?" Dominic asked, his voice thoughtful. I nodded, leaning against him. "All the time. But I believe everything happens for a reason. It was a long and painful journey, but it brought us back together, stronger than ever." He kissed my forehead. "I'm just grateful we have another chance. I don't want to waste a single moment." As the days passed, we made preparations for our move to Portugal. We tied up loose ends, said our goodbyes, and looked forward to the new life that awaited us. Each step felt like shedding an old skin, leaving behind the pain and embracing the hope of a brighter future. On the day of our departure, we stood at the airport, our hands intertwined as we looked at the ticket in our hands. The announcement for our flight echoed through the terminal, and we exchanged a glance filled with excitement and anticipation. "This is it," Dominic said, squeezing my hand. "Our new beginning." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. Yes, a new beginning. As we boarded the plane, I looked back one last time, knowing that we were leaving behind a chapter of our lives filled with heartache and struggle. But ahead of us lay the promise of a future built on love, trust, and the strength we had found in each other. We settled into our seats, and as the plane took off, I rested my head on Dominic's shoulder. The city below grew smaller, the horizon expanding before us. We were ready to face whatever came next together. In Portugal, we found a charming villa nestled in the countryside, surrounded by lush vineyards and rolling hills. It was a place where we could heal, grow, and build the life we had always dreamed of. One evening, as we sat on the terrace, watching the sun set over the horizon, Dominic took my hand and looked into my eyes. "Regina, I've loved you from the moment I met you, and I'll love you until the end of time. Thank you for never giving up on us." Tears welled up in my eyes as I smiled at him. and I've loved you with all my heart, Dominic. This is our forever, and I wouldn't want it any other way." As the stars began to twinkle in the sky, we held each other close, the warmth of our love wrapping around us like a blanket. The past was behind us, and the future stretched out before us, a beautiful tapestry waiting to be woven with the threads of our love and dreams.